Welcome one, welcome all to the Rebel News Daily Livestream. rebelnews.com/livestreams is where you get the daily feed. We're on Rumble, Odyssey, YouTube, and Getter. Joining me, Jeremy Loffredo. How are you doing, good sir?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
Don't be too ecstatic to be here, Jeremy.
I'm good. I'm good.
I see you got a nice, shiny new place. Whereabouts are you? Tell the audience, please.
I'm in the Big Apple. I'm in New York City. It's actually not that far from you. Yeah, I'm
That's
just a
true.
little south. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're free to come to this country now. Maybe we'll see you soon. As of, I think, 2 days from now, you can come to Canada without quarantining, without being vaccinated, without downloading the stupid app. Surely they won't use it for anything else. But as of the end of the month, people can come into our wonderful country and experience the lack of freedom we have here. If you want
That's
to
really nice of
interact,
them.
pardon me.
That's really nice of them.
Yeah, I know. It's, the Queen, I shouldn't make Queen jokes, whatever. The Queen has allowed us to become our own country, finally. And maybe Prince Charles, who's now the King, will be just as nice to us. If you want to interact with us, you can send a Rumble rant or an Odyssey hyper chat. They allow crypto and fiat, if you know what I'm talking about, to post a message, question, comment, insult, compliment. I do foster a lot of insults on this program, Jeremy, since you're new to the Rebel News live stream. It just happens with my audience, and we take it with a grain of salt and tongue-in-cheek. But Joe Biden, you can never tell when he's being told, if he's being fed lines, if he's coming up with it on his own, if he's having some sort of episode. But his latest episode, we'll call it, was about Hurricane Ian, which is supposedly going to ravage through most of Central and North Florida. It looks terrible, worse than any we've seen. I think they're saying upwards of 100 years, but I'm no meteorologist, but it looks really bad. So we've got a little bit of coverage on that to start. And let's start with Joe Biden's comments on how people can most safely protect themselves from this terrible storm.
Let me be clear. If you're in a state where hurricanes often strike, like Florida or the Gulf Coast or into Texas, a vital part of preparing for hurricane season is to get vaccinated now. Everything is more complicated if you're not vaccinated and a hurricane or a natural disaster hits. Let me be clear.
I like how it's not even like a regular sentence. He just inserts the tagline. The best thing to do is get vaccinated now. Say no to drugs. Jeremy, is this the best advice you can think of?
I mean, he's right. If shelters and if food drives and if like emergency services are more available to, those who are vaccinated, then being unvaccinated, it complicates everything.
That's an interesting point.
But it's not a COVID thing or like a vaccine thing. It's a policy thing. But it's especially funny that he'll say the vaccine will help you from a hurricane, a tornado, a tsunami, et cetera, but it won't stop the spread of COVID. But it'll save you from a hurricane. It's a very interesting, medical procedure that stops you from dying in a hurricane, but it doesn't stop the COVID.
I like how he could only name Florida as one of the states that might be affected by the hurricane. Oh, Texas, yeah, throw that in there. There's no Georgia or anything else there.
Florida and the Gulf.
That's right. He's got a map in front of him, I'm sure. It's one of the old-timey maps where it's Pangea or something for when he was born. Don Lemon also was chiming in on this. They had, what is this, a director for the, I don't know what NOAA stands for. Do you?
No, some national weather. I'm assuming. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. So Don Lemon, who's recently been downgraded to morning show. I guess he's not there yet, and they're going to do a collaboration of several failures on CNN to do a morning show. But I guess he's winding down his night show here, and he's got this director. And this is a great time to be, a meteorologist, a TV meteorologist. And they had a great one on Tucker Carlson last night. I'd imagine this guy's good in his own right. Probably doesn't care about Don Lemon's politics, it seems like. But Don Lemon really wants to explain to the audience that this is being exacerbated and made worse by climate change. And the guy doesn't really seem to want to hear that from Don Lemon. So let's play that, please.
Can you tell us what this is and what effect climate change has on this phenomenon?
Well, we can come back and talk about climate change at a later time. I want to focus on the here and now. We think the rapid intensification is probably almost done. There could be a little bit more intensification as it's still over the warm waters of the eastern Gulf of Mexico, but I don't think we're going to get any more rapid intensification. If you look here, you can actually see, pretty interesting for your viewers, you can actually see a second eye wall forming around the inner eye wall, and that's basically the second eye wall has overtaken the original eye wall, and that should arrest development.
So listen, I'm just trying to get that. You said you want to talk about climate change, but what effect does climate change have on this phenomenon that is happening now? Because it seems these storms are intensifying. That's the question here.
I don't think you can link climate change to any one event.
Okay.
On the whole, on the cumulative, climate change may be making storms worse, but to link it to any one event, I would caution against that.
Okay. Well, listen, I grew up there, and these storms are intensifying. Something is causing them to intensify. So this storm is just—it's a massive.
Forget
one.
about your
Its effects are also being
science,
felt,
weather
in the
boy.
southern part of Florida. What about the areas that may not be taking a direct hit or experiencing the storm surge, like on the West Coast? How much will the rest of the state be impacted?
Yeah, that's actually a good question, because we flip out to this other graphic. You can see this orange area is the size. So if you think about how big the wind field is, and you can just see how big that wind field is relative to traditional hurricanes, and as that moves up and over the Florida Peninsula into the southeast United States, you can see this big area, blue area of tropical storm warnings. So it's really going to be a big event for not just...
I was going to say, I don't think he talks more about climate change there, but he just had to inject it in there.
It's so funny. He says, I grew up there. It's like, that's fun. He's really bringing the facts and the data to this news report. You know, I grew up there. Cool, Don. We're talking to a scientist, you know?
You know, it'd be so much easier if Don Lemon didn't take himself so seriously and was able to just pontificate about things and say, hey, you know what, I grew up there and it feels like they're getting worse and worse. But no, they have to at CNN approach it from a position like this is the only outlook that exists. So of course climate change is making it worse. Maybe it's Chinese weather machines, maybe it's HARP. Who knows, Jeremy Loffredo, known conspiracy theorist.
He says, we'll get to climate change later if you want. Like, he gave him an out, you know,
Yeah.
But like as a CNN company man, he had to bring it up again. You know, a big hurricane, it's not scary enough. They have to be getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It has to be your fault that they're getting bigger. But, you know, regular one hurricane, it's not enough, even if it's the worst hurricane in 100 years. But Don says to the scientist, you know, please just give me this. Please say it was climate change, please. And the scientist is too, you know, he has too much integrity for CNN.
That's why he's being rewarded with, you know, the earliest of early shows. He's even bumped below Wolf Blitzer, who's basically a cyborg at this point. So that's how well Don Lemon's doing. We've got a little bit more, you know, environment stuff from up here in Canada. Stephen Guilbeault, who is the handsome, possibly werewolf environment minister here. He's talking about how the Conservatives want to end the carbon tax, which of course raises everybody's prices at the gas pump and in their homes. And he says they're trying to cancel a price on pollution, which is taking money away from Canadians. I don't understand. Let's play this.
Today, Pierre Poilievre and his Conservative politicians tried to stop carbon pricing in Canada. What does that mean? It means that families in Ontario that will be receiving this year checks of $700 for their climate rebate won't get it. It means that folks in Alberta, families in Alberta who would be getting $1,100 check this year won't get it. It also means that Pierre Poilievre wants to make pollution free for big polluters, polluting our air, polluting our water, and contributing to climate change. We don't think it's right. That's why we stood up to him. We said no. We think we can fight pollution, help Canadians with affordability. The Conservative Party and Pierre Poilievre have no plans to do either of those things.
First of all, I think we all know how Frenchly he pronounces it's like he's got a grapefruit in his mouth or something. But this is very interesting, Jeremy, and I'll explain why I think this. Because he's saying that because they won't get a $700 check or an $1,100 check, they're actually taking money away from Canadians by ending a tax. So instead of you just having the money in your pocket to begin with, he thinks that it's better and should make more sense. Everybody should understand this, that it's better to take the money away from you and then give some of it back if you've overpaid than just leaving the money in your pocket to begin with. And of course, the people who are getting $1,100 a month might actually be paying that anyways or more, but also it's also taking money away from people who can afford this. So we're doing our own little wealth redistribution here by saying that people who may not actually pay this much in carbon tax because maybe they don't drive as much, or they pay rent so they don't have to pay excess of heating amounts, we'll just give them the money and we'll use taxpayer dollars to do that. So you're basically paying for somebody else who might not use as much energy. So you're giving them money. So it doesn't make any sense from two different standpoints, I don't think. And for him to say that they're contributing to climate change, I'm wondering how, carbon emissions contributes to dirty water. I would like to see what he means by that. Maybe he's got a point, but I'm going to guess at this point the Justin Trudeau government, which is full of people who have no idea what they're doing, is not, giving a full explanation to that somewhere. Probably has something to do with equity and inclusion, if I had to guess.
What is this man's name again?
Stephen Guilbeault.
He needs a better microphone. But I did hear what he was saying. I mean, it's so silly. They're doing it in the U.S. too. Just like you could keep all this money in your pocket. Of course you could keep this money in your pocket, but we rather take this money, invest it in, like green tech, carbon capture technology, whatever it is, Bill Gates' latest company, and then send you some money back. Maybe you'll get a check, maybe you won't. It's so silly, and it's a giant scheme. I almost cursed.
Not on the internet, Jeremy.
It's just a scheme, and it's really unfortunate. And this guy, I could understand him. His microphone was really bad, but he is obviously trying to sell this to the people and pull the wool over their eyes.
Yeah, and write your letters to Jeremy at rebelnews.com if you're offended by what he said, as many of us are. His half swear word. I
wasn't sure if YouTube would.
I think we generally go by, late night television rules. Maybe not F-bombs, but maybe a few curse words here and there. Producer Efron doesn't encourage it, I don't think, but we won't cancel you for that. We're going to go to a break here. Jeremy, stay with us. We're going to get to, I think, my favorite politician, Jacinda, out of New Zealand, and we're going to get to some European tyranny as well. So let's throw to this commercial, and we'll be right back.
My mug? I know. It's pretty cool. So is this hoodie I got on, and you could have it on too if you check out our special website at rebelnewsstore.com. That's where you can see Freedom Focus hoodies that we have for you, beanies, cell phone cases, you name it, all while supporting our journalism, where we fight to bring you the other side of the story, as opposed to, being forced by the Trudeau government to fund leftist media out of your taxes. The truth is, without you and your generosity, there is no Rebel News. So again, if you like the reports that we bring you and that we also fight for freedoms in Canada, please consider doing some shopping, picking up some swag at rebelnewsstore.com. We appreciate your support.
Always listen to Dre Humphrey if you know what's best for you. New Zealand's Prime Minister is an admitted socialist. She has no concept of a real job. I think you'll notice that a lot of the stuff she says is clearly not bounced off of anybody. She never has to argue or debate with anyone on anything. And you'll see what I mean right here. Let's play this, Olivia.
This week we launched an initiative alongside companies and non-profits to help improve research and understanding of how a person's online experiences are curated by automated processes. This will also be important in understanding more about mis- and disinformation online, a challenge that we must, as leaders, address. Sadly, I think it's easy to dismiss this problem as one in the margins. I can certainly understand the desire to leave it to someone else. As leaders, we're rightly concerned that even the most light touch approaches to disinformation could be misinterpreted as being hostile to the values of free speech that we value so highly. But while I cannot tell you today what the answer is to this challenge, I can say with complete certainty that we cannot ignore it. To do so poses an equal threat to the norms we all value. After all, how do you successfully end a war if people are led to believe the reason for its existence is not only legal but noble? How do you tackle climate change if people do not believe it exists? How do you ensure the human rights of others are upheld when they are subjected to hateful and dangerous rhetoric and ideology? The weapons may be different, but the goals of those who perpetuate them is often the same: to cause chaos and reduce the ability of others to defend themselves, to disband communities, to collapse the collective strength of countries who work together. But we have an opportunity here to ensure that these particular weapons of war do not become an established part of warfare. In these times, I'm acutely aware of how easy it is to feel disheartened. We are facing many battles on many fronts, but there is cause for optimism, because for every new weapon we face, there is a new tool to overcome it. For every attempt to push the world into chaos is a collective conviction to bring us back to order. We have the means. We just need the collective will.
I think if you're going to nominate any person to be in charge of anything, it wouldn't be her. I mean, New Zealand disagrees, but if you're going to say who should be in charge of saying what's good and what is not good on the internet, I certainly wouldn't choose this lady. She's absolutely off the walls crazy. Jeremy, I don't know how you feel about this, but Jacinda Ardern coming up here and calling the internet a weapon of war, and they should be able to decide what's propaganda. You can't just be on the internet saying that Russia's right or that climate change isn't, a huge deal. That should be against the law.
And it's funny, she's saying, she's like, mis and disinformation is a giant problem, and then the camera pans to like the leaders of like Tanzania, and like they're like, we can't feed anyone. Like, how is it's just such different priorities. But she's like arguing, how can you take on climate change when you have free speech and democracy? You can't. And it's so it shows you where, because that's the it's the predominant narrative when you go to like the World Economic Forum or even people in the US. It's just like, we can't address these issues, like, and it's so infantile and so like movie like your words can make the world heat up and burn, like we need to stop this. It's like you have to be screen damaged to believe that. Like you really need to be an infant to believe that your words can make climate change worse. It's so silly, and obviously our viewers and we don't believe that, but the people who are watching TV all day and watching mainstream media, I guess this is something that they agree with.
I like this term, screen damaged, you used.
Screen damage, yeah. You're watching too much TV. You're on the internet too much. You're screen damaged. You can't think straight.
Yeah, I have a friend who just came in with a new podcast called "The TV Told Me," so I thought that was a good title for him. It's like you said, the feeling I had when I watched this first time earlier this morning was that they're basically, and we'll see this with this next clip, they are outright telling you about their totalitarianism, authoritarianism, however you want to categorize it these days. They're so brazen. Jacinda Ardern, in a country where I'd wager that there probably is no self-defense with weapons laws, she's saying that we need to use censorship on the internet as an act of self-defense against harms and of war. How can you end a war when people are freely speaking about it on the internet? Well, first of all, they're not. There's nothing that comes out of Russia on the internet. You can't even get, I believe it's RT on Telegram either in Canada. It's banned from viewing here. So they already are doing it, and it hasn't ended the war. So I don't know what other war she would be referring to. Maybe it's the war on terror or the info war, Jeremy Loffredo. But
yeah, because they're already there's a clear, information war against any information that's coming from the Russian government. Like RT is banned on YouTube, Russia Today. So it's already happening. So this idea that she's looking for the political will to do so, you already have it. You're kicking them off of the internet left and right.
People are going to clip this and be like, see, Rebel News is paid by Putin. People already say that. I don't know if you've seen that, especially to
I've
Ian.
seen that, yeah.
Yeah, we're paid by everyone. I would like to be paid by, like the NBA or the UFC or something, but it's only the UN and the Kremlin that get the checks to my doorstep. We've got the, what is this, the European Commission on something chief. She doesn't like this free bank. This is funny. I did watch this earlier. Let's play this. She basically doesn't want anyone to control banking except for them. It's great.
Where do we stand? We central bankers, we have been operating as a monetary anchor in relation to the commercial banks and the private money. If we are not in that game, if we are not involved in experimenting, in innovating in terms of digital central bank money, we risk losing the role of anchor that we have played for many, many decades. And we have historical examples of period where the central bank monetary anchor was not there, and that precipitated crisis after crisis. That certainly was the case at the time of the free banking in the 19th century. Do we want to go back to those days? Probably not. I would say certainly not from our vantage point, as a result of which we have to respond to the demand for those digital payments in order to maintain the role of anchor that we have been playing regularly.
So definitely from her vantage point, Jeremy, what do you think she means by being the anchor in the monetary system?
Oh, it's just imagine like looking at people and saying like, where do we stand? Central bankers. She knows that they are, what's tying this entire, money printing financial system together. And if we find a way to, pay each other and get paid in, channels that, kind of juke out or, leave out the central bankers, they'll lose their power. And we just had here the Federal Reserve Chair, Powell. He said, a U.S. central bank digital currency, it won't be anonymous. And it's like, what does that mean? Because like right now, cash, which is given to us from the Federal Reserve, printed, that's anonymous. So it kind of, all these people who love digital currencies, they're going to give us freedom, X and Y. That's not the same digital currencies that they have in mind, and that's clear.
Yeah, and especially when she says from our vantage point, she's basically admitting that they need to find a way to make money and be able to control this because there's such a demand for digital currencies. But I don't know how it stops it. The problem I would see with somebody coming out with their own form of printed currency would be all the securities that have been built up over, 100 years of print money. And the identification numbers and the watermarks and everything. It'd be pretty difficult for somebody to come up with a new version of print money. Maybe you could turn your...
Probably impossible.
Yeah, your crypto money into print somehow and withdraw it. But would that be allowed? I don't think so. But it's something that people need to stop and stand up against. I think the elimination of the government knowing literally everything that you do. I mean, their cell phone's already the tracking device. So is there any deal about anything else? Yes, because you need to be able to do some things, transactions privately, and trust your citizens to report that when necessary on their taxes. Other than that, though, they seem to want to have zero faith in everybody and treat everybody like a baby hooked up to the Matrix, which is, it appears, Jacinda, the European Union, the Central Bank, the World Economic Forum, they all seem to want it, and that seems to be the future we're going towards.
Yeah, privacy is not something that privacy for them. They love that. They love meetings behind closed doors. They love, to talk to each other, and never have their communications seen by anyone else. But privacy for us is not good. I think it was Julian Assange who said you need giant organizations with tons of political power need to be transparent, because if they're doing things that the public doesn't like, the public needs to know so they can oppose them. But people like us who don't have any really political power other than our power to vote, we need a lot of transparency. We need the most transparency, so we can talk to each other and communicate and pay each other in private, which we're heading further and further away from that.
Well, she said that other times where they didn't have control, they ran into problems. The only one I can think of on the top of my head was Libya, and they had to topple that government. They wanted to move to a gold standard. And there was some other connection when they created the central bank. It's probably a conspiracy. Everybody can go look up the conspiracy of the Titanic. I think the conspiracy for that one is that everybody who opposed central banking was on the Titanic. Yeah, you've heard that one. I bet you have.
I've heard that one.
Let's go to another commercial. We've got lots of stuff. We've got your story to update everybody on. We've also got some creepy books that I wrote about in a children's library. And then people are asking, should we get our the babies of our friends, should we take them to get vaccinated without their parents knowing? We'll talk to you in a minute. Misunderstood, rebelnewsplus.com to find that show. I mean, they got good shirts. Abort government, assume my gender. I mean, they're popular shirts. They're flying off the shelves. We need a Jeremy Loffredo split screen with Seth Green that I created a few weeks ago. If you just dye your hair, you look just like him. Everybody can go check that out on their own. But Jeremy, tell everybody this story you've been working on. I'm not too familiar with it, and the Canadian audience might not be. The American audience is really supporting this story, Help Save Evelyn Young. Can you update people on what's going on and give a little bit of background on that?
Sure. So there's a hospital in Kansas City called Children's Mercy Hospital. And this hospital, quote unquote, medically kidnaps children at a rate far higher than any hospital in the region or in the country. It happens so often that state senators in Missouri have introduced legislation to try to investigate the hospital and get them to stop medically kidnapping children so often. And all the families that I've talked to, they have the same exact story. They have this, they are in the hospital, they take their kid to the hospital. The hospital does something that the parents disagree with, whether it's, the kind of medication they're putting the kids on, or they hurt the kid in some way. And the parents say, we want to take our kid out and get a second opinion. And it's right when that happens, in all of these cases, is when the state gets called on the parents, and they try to they revoke custody of the children. The children go in the hands of the state or to the foster care system. They stay in the hospital, and their most recent victim is this woman, this woman's daughter, a 10-year-old Evelyn Young, who was in the hospital. She was given this drug by the hospital that the family disagreed with. And it turns out that she became partially blind from the drug, and she suffered from encephalopathy, so her brain was swelling. And her parents freaked out. And then the hospital essentially gaslit them and used their freaking out as justification to say that you're not mentally fit to be this child's daughter. I mean, their parents. And so they're fighting to get their kid back. And I'm covering that story, but upon arriving in Kansas City, I've seen that there's dozens of families that have suffered this exact same fate, where their kids are stolen from this hospital, or whether it's financial reasons, or whether the doctors have ego trips, but they're stolen from this hospital one way or another, and a lot of families don't get their kids back. So we're trying to fight against that, and you can help us at saveevelyn.com. It's a website we set up to try to help the family financially afford a lawyer to get their daughter back. So definitely help us out. That's what's going on in Kansas City.
Yeah, that's EVLYN. Now, Jeremy, I assume people are going to double assume there, that the reason the hospital would do something like this, and I'm just throwing this out there, I'm not making a claim against them, is that it would generate more income for them to keep people in the hospital longer, give them more medicine, et cetera, et cetera. But what would you say is the hospital's justification for this? Is there a reason why they're saying they need to keep these children there longer? Is it just because they say, we need to give them the proper care? Is there some official reason they're giving when confronted with these cases?
I mean, all the parents have the same story. Like, they want to take their kids to get a second opinion, and the hospital says, no, the kid stays. And when the parents say, this is kind of crazy, what do you mean the kid stays? The hospital gets the state to force the kid to stay. So a lot of the parents believe that their kids are seen as, cash cows. The insurance companies are paying for their stays. And it's weird with Evelyn. Right when they showed up to the hospital, the family was asked if they wanted to be part of an NIH-funded, research study, and they were like, no. And so the hospital was like, you should really look at this paper. We'd really like to enroll Evelyn in this study. And the family said no. And so right then and there, the family said that the hospital kind of became a little more colder. They ruffled some feathers right when they got there. And then in all of the reports that the hospital used to take custody from the parents, to take Evelyn away, and so all the papers that they gave to the courts, they say Evelyn is fully unvaccinated and homeschooled. And so the dad was like, they really care more about the fact that she's unvaccinated and homeschooled than her current medical condition. So it really seems like the hospital, while they make money on keeping someone there, they also, they kind of are insulted that this family sort of doesn't believe in the system that they're all a part of, the unvaccinated homeschooled. So it's really interesting to see all of this unravel, and hopefully Evelyn won't suffer the same fate as these other children who never see their parents again. Hopefully Evelyn can go home to her family.
Now, I have some friends who work in the medical community, and they, of course, hold it to the highest regard no matter what the subject. And I'm thinking from up here in Canada that how is this happening in a place like Missouri? It's supposed to be a red state. Would you say that it's more so, in your personal opinion, the fact that it's, big cities anywhere tend to be more liberal in this sense, or is it the medical system who is just going to be more likely to say, hey, you should be vaccinated and this is very important?
Yeah, I mean, I would assume, Kansas, Missouri, these are red states, but at the same time, the people who work at these hospitals and the doctors and the insurance companies, like, they don't have any, insurance companies don't have politics. They just see money. But hospitals themselves, like, these people are coming from all over to work there. It's one of the most prestigious research hospitals in the country. So who knows where these doctors are from? But, the philosophy that kind of revolves inside of, giant government-funded, pharmaceutical industry-funded medical institutions is not one of, like, really left or right. It's more so, we believe in this system. We believe all our medicines work. We believe the pharmaceutical industry is good. And those who don't believe it are, uninformed rednecks, and they don't deserve to, take care of their children the way they see fit, because that way is dangerous.
Yeah, I would have to agree that it's its own version of politics in itself. I want to move and show the website there, Olivia, please, so people know where to go. Thank you. That's Save Evelyn, and then donations that go to that campaign are on along the right side, and you can watch the video as well. Fly over to Calgary, which you can do from Kansas City, Missouri now without being masked or quarantining as of tomorrow, 2 days. So flying into the weekend, into Canadian Thanksgiving, I think a couple weeks now, Jeremy. Our Thanksgiving's in October. Don't ask me why. natives. We don't have pilgrims here. I think they were called settlers. All that rhubarb, smash the patriarchy. But Calgary Elementary School in Alberta, Canada, we got an anonymous email that I followed up to, which was somebody taking pictures inside of a children's library at a public school. It's, I believe, grades 5 to 9, so 9 years old through 13 or 14 years old, and they're pushing these books on them. So they're displayed prominently in the library in the front window. They've got this little sign here if you want to scroll down. They've got a sign that says new books. I think it's keep going maybe. Yeah, so even the sign that says new books you can see right there is a pride flag with the black and brown thing because somehow that's a sexuality too. But they're pushing these books on the children, and there's no restrictions on ages of who can rent these books out, who can borrow them from the library. So you could have a 9-year-old walk in there and be like, what the hell is this book about? My name's Billy. I don't know any better. And open this up. And the one book that they might open up is called Flamer, as you can imagine what that might be about. So this is somehow an award-winning book, even though it's a weird, gross book. And I'm not saying ban the book from publication. If you're a weird person who wants to read about a guy's weird teenage sexual experiences at a summer camp, go for it. Give him his money if you want to. But this isn't for kids. So it has children telling other children to masturbate into a Mountain Dew bottle. And we've got this picture here. We've got, it's more like jokes that a 20-something-year-old would joke about with his friends, which is why I'm saying in the grand scheme of things, it's just a weird graphic novel. Also, a guy talking about watching his father's porn. And if we scroll down a bit more, you can see a child watching an adult shower. Again, weird book. If you're a weirdo and you want this in your graphic novel, go for it. I don't care. But not for 9, 10, 11-year-olds. I certainly wasn't exposed to this weird stuff in elementary school. The second book they have, can we go back to that for a second? They've got a weird book about a child who wants to start his own business. Oh, isn't that lovely? They want to start their own talent agency. Isn't that lovely too? But the child in the book, the first other kid that they sign and their faux talent agency for kids, or whatever it is of course a 13-year-old drag queen boy. So that's the kind of stuff that's right on the front. This teacher wanted to remain anonymous, so we allowed that. But they did prove that they were a teacher that works there. We wanted to verify that side of everything. But this is the sort of stuff you think, again, Alberta, Canada, they herald themselves as the Texas of Canada, a conservative province, really fighting the Trudeau government. Elementary school showing like weird nude stuff to kids. And it's great that we have whistleblowers on stuff like that. Yeah, see, there's the other books. It's a drag to be something is what one of them's called. And they also, if you scroll down, they have a BLM flag. There you go. That's in one of their hallways. So they're just ripe with the social justice there. Any thoughts on that, Jeremy? I know that was a mouthful for me just because I wrote that.
I mean, schools are such an interesting, because we don't, only the kids go. So we really need those teacher whistleblowers, because other than that, we don't know what's happening in there. It's almost, it's illegal for us to just walk into school and look around. Rightfully so. I understand why that might be. You don't want random people coming in the library at a elementary school, but it's really, other than the teacher whistleblowers, we'll never know what's happening inside of these schools. So it's great that you found that out.
Well, the video cameras inside of a classroom, I think, is a good idea. Some schools have that. A lot of daycares have that. As long as it's just inside the classrooms or hallways and not some other creepy areas, of course, then I think that's going to be a good idea, where if you're a parent, maybe you're at work, you can just tune in to see what your kid's learning about today, maybe. Maybe you tune into that history class and they're just learning about World War II. Or maybe you're tuning into that kid's history class and he's learning why he's a racist, colonialist, mass murderer or some sort of ideology like that. The last story regarding children, which producer Olivia aptly titled as Save the Children for all these things, is, I forget what this post came from, but it's some sort of advice column. Can we pull that up? It's a Washington Post advice column for Ask Damon, not Matt Damon. Should I get my anti-vax friends' baby vaccinated without telling them? Can we scroll down and let's let Jeremy read some of these questions. Is it paywalled? We'll get a paid version for you guys. Pardon me?
No, it was paywalled. But, I mean, it's crazy. You get 2 years of, pandemic, psychological warfare on people, and we have Americans asking if it's okay to kidnap their friends' babies. It's really wild what's happening. I mean, thankfully, the columnist said, maybe we shouldn't kidnap their babies and we should just, socially, alienate our friends instead, which is really nice of him. But yeah, I mean, I thought it was so silly, and it's crazy. It's being published by the Washington. This is a question that I don't think many people are asking it, but when it's published in the Washington Post, it's assumed by readers that people are asking these questions, and these questions are okay to ask. It's propaganda, so it's harmful in that way.
Well, maybe he just made up the question himself. I don't eliminate that idea.
Exactly.
Or he had one person asking him that as a joke. I'd imagine there's a lot of people who troll these different publications because there's a lot of people that troll our publications and email us stupid stuff. But there's a lot of good emails too. I shouldn't leave that part out. Let's go to another break. We've got a bit more ArriveCan stuff. If you want to contribute a question or comment or concern or compliment or drag queen story time, you can do that on Odyssey or Rumble with a Rumble rant, and we'll get to those in a moment. We'll be right back.
So I absolutely love having the opportunity to chat with you, to chat with our ever-growing audience. But I'd actually love for you to have that opportunity as well. We actually have advertising opportunities available with rebelnews.com. We don't get handouts from the government. We trust on supporters, viewers, and advertisers like you. So instead of folks listening to me in this spot, they could actually be checking out your company, getting information about your business. For more information or to advertise with us, send an email to ads@rebelnews.com.
Producer Efron, does Adam Sos, is he cutting just a sick promo there, or did he memorize lines? Because either way, that's talent that cannot be paralleled. Pardon me? All memorized. He's Tom Cruising it out there. Or maybe like a Vince Vaughn rant where he goes on one of these rants, or maybe he says this, or maybe he says that. He's like, maybe this is what you're going to do, maybe it's not what you're going to do. One of those epic Vince Vaughn rants. Another guy who does that is Jeremy Piffin. But I digress. The article about the ArriveCan app, that was what we were calling our wonderful app that everybody assumes, knows, is expecting it's going to turn into digital ID. Yesterday I spoke with Alexa Lavoie on a live stream who was talking about how they don't plan to delete the information they got from it. I wonder why that is. But Blacklock's reporter, now I take a little bit of issue with this article here, and I'll tell you why in a moment. Let's bring that up. Of course, they're a supremely paywalled organization, but they give you a taste. And they say the ArriveCan app, intended to speed vaccine checks at border crossings, instead slowed traffic with a third of travelers unsure of how to comply the customs. And didn't realize there was a second page. Immigration Union testified yesterday. Lineups were so long, travelers urinated on themselves while waiting to clear customs, MPs were told. That's not funny, Jeremy Loffredo, peeing at the border. Now, the problem I had with this article is the prefacing it as if it was meant to speed vaccine checks. That's not what it was for. You might want to preface that by saying the government said that what it's for, but we all know it's 2022. That's not what it was actually for. Do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I mean, like, if you want to speed up vaccine checks at the border, if you want to speed up, getting across the border, don't require a vaccine. Like it's not, rocket science here, but like the idea that it was intended to speed up vaccine checks. No, it was intended to coerce people into getting vaccinated to travel. But yeah, no, so that is a crazy way to start the article.
Well, I'm glad you great minds think alike here. And also, of course, intended to collect data of people and what their frequent movements are. But how surprising that people wouldn't understand, especially Americans who are just like, I can travel freely in my country, but I still can't go there, unfortunately. Did we want to cut to some of Lincoln Jay's footage at the boob guy protest that's happening right now? Is that what we're about to show? Yeah, let's show it. Olivia keeps saying, if you want to. She's so pleasing to the host here. She just said, yeah. Of course, we've got integral Canadian flags, large protests. Now, producer Efron, or perhaps Lincoln Jay, was telling me that the students were trolling some of the protesters. And here's the problem, Jeremy, is that a lot of these protesters are what I would call career protesters. Yes, I agree, and many agree with what they do and stand for, but they kind of come and do this whole song and dance, and a lot of people who lead these things are clout chasing. I mean, you've got people who, there's a person who drives a car with writing all over it all across the country. There's Bubble Van Guy. There's prominent superstar G-string man. I mean, there's all this cast of characters, and they come out to a school, and the show sort of becomes about them. And these students, I think, recognize, tomfoolery, buffoonery, if you will, and they start calling it out. The other side, I would say, is, what are these kids doing outside if not protesting what's going on? They probably just don't want to be in class. That's the thing I see with a lot of high school protests where kids come out, where there's like 5 kids. I saw this with like a transgender protest. I forget which state it is, but they were putting it as gender-specific bathrooms in a school in that community, and there was children, hundreds of them, who had a walkout. But there was 5 kids standing there holding signs. The rest of the kids were just standing there. You could even see some kids making out in the crowd. So these child protests aren't exactly what I think we would all like them to be. They're just there to get out of class, I think. Do you agree?
Yeah, I know, like, during the whole, like, George Floyd thing in the U.S. and whenever there was, like, a really crazy, school shooting, the administration at the school would say, you guys are allowed, if you want, to walk out during this period. And obviously everyone's like, okay, yeah, I would love to go outside. That's literally the only thing you want to do as a kid in high school is go outside. So if you get a free pass to go outside, whether it's for George Floyd or a shooting or transgender or whatever it is, you're just going to walk outside. So it's always going to look bigger than it actually is in terms of the people that are there and the people who actually care about the issue.
Yeah, and one of the things I remember from high school was the phantom rule of, if the teacher doesn't show up for 15 minutes, you're allowed to go home. Yeah. I think that was a thing that was worldwide in an English-speaking country as a pretend rule. I want to go to some of the paid chats, Olivia, and then I want to talk about this NDP motion. They want to lower the age of voting. So let's see what we got. We'll get newcomer Jeremy Loffredo. Writer Dave likes to call him Loaf. If you want to read some of these, Jeremy. J. Lowe.
He says, why can't the New York State troopers try to go after these taxi drivers who are knowingly driving these migrants to the Canadian border? And, Andrew Jeremy does not look like Seth Green. Leave him alone. It's very funny. Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, like, as someone who's, I think I pay attention to, what's going on in the news. I talk to people when I go outside and when I walk around. I didn't know that taxi drivers were even taking these people to the Canadian border. I mean, it is like a 7 or 8 hour drive from New York City. It's crazy that a New York City taxi driver who normally just drives 5 miles north and 5 miles south and 5 miles west would go 8 hours to the Canadian border.
Well,
I didn't know that was happening, to be honest.
It's in the northeast where they go to Roxham Road in the Quebec crossing. So I don't think it's New York City. It's New York State. And there's an old tried and true investigative story where there's like a cab company near the border that shuttles people to the border and is like, hey, this is what's going to happen. So that's an interesting question.
It's a very interesting question. I would love to look into that, because if that's actually happening, that would be really interesting to go there and talk to some people.
Yeah, it's been, I think, a few years since Rebel News sent somebody from the American side to the border, so that would be interesting.
It would be.
Any other ones, Olivia? Go ahead, Jeremy. My TV is really far away from me.
Yeah, you got it. Similar situation to Evelyn happened in D.C. Children's Hospital last week. there was an Amber Alert for a mom removing her child because she wanted a second opinion. Yeah. So that's really unfortunate and that's really scary. And the more parents I talk to, ever since I've hopped on this story, so many parents have reached out to me and so many parents have been put in touch with me who, state law enforcement or child protective services, or whoever you want to say, gets involved just because parents don't like the medical treatment that their kid is receiving at a certain hospital. So it's a giant problem, and no one's talking about it. And it really needs to be addressed because this is really scary in terms of, parental rights and family rights in the US and Canada.
Well, if you recall seeing in Canada, and they may have done this in New York with the vaccinations, that 12 years old was low enough to go and get vaccinated on your own. And the bypassing they did with that was using or categorizing it as an emergency service. So if you're 12 years old and above, you can receive emergency services without medical services without the consent of your parent in Canada. Now I'm sure people have seen on like Cops where the person's unconscious and they're just like, we need their permission. That's we're obviously a little bit more government friendly in this country. Whether you agree with that or not, they don't need their permission for that. I mean, you can refuse to take a ride in the ambulance, but this is how they categorize that. And I'm willing to bet that there is a place in Canada where they would say something like that. Like, if you don't want to get your child vaccinated, this is a required service, and we are going to vaccinate your child if they want to. And they're going to say, Jimmy and Sally, which is every child's name in the 50s, you need this or else you're not going to be cool. Can we go to this story about the NDP? It's a proposed bill. I don't know if he's got video on it. Do we have that? There we go, yeah. That's a freshly written article. Who wrote that? Oh, William Wild Bill Diaz, as we call him. Big Willie style as well. So the New Democrats, I almost said the New Democrats, they want to lower the voting age to 16. Of course, there's so many things wrong with that, starting with the idea that they're saying that this is, you could argue that voting's the most important thing there is. So if you're old enough and mature enough to vote and shape the future of your country and decide as a voter and participate in the process of how laws are made and which laws should be made or taken away, then surely you're old enough to drive. Surely you're old enough to have a beer. Surely you're old enough to join the military. Surely you're old enough to, and I said this on Twitter, then why isn't this guy trying to legalize, sex work for children? I wouldn't advocate for that. But if you're saying children are 16-year-olds are smart enough, intelligent enough, they have enough logic to them, to their decision making to participate in national votes at the age of 16, then there's a whole other laundry list of things we need to start looking into. Cigarette smoking, gambling. Why aren't there 16-year-olds at the casino? They can decide who should run the country. Why can't they decide if they want to play a game of roulette, Jeremy?
Yeah, any liberal party in the US or in Canada, they want to get children, teenagers, whatever you want to call them, to start voting. These are people who, normally don't have full-time jobs, normally spend a lot of time on their cell phones and on the internet, and their peers do the same, and they're way more susceptible to, propaganda. So, they're just like online, on TikTok, on whatever they are, getting like news from someone who doesn't really know what they're talking about, or is targeting them with a certain narrative. And these are the people that they want to vote because they know that they can count on them to vote for the quote unquote right thing.
Mm-hmm. With the Voxes, the Now This, anything on Snapchat that's promoted as news, that isn't just dancing like this and all the stupid dances that happens. Thank you. I've been working on it. I don't understand why there's so many channels focused on just two teenagers doing choreographed dances. It's literally just like a sign of the times. I don't it's just pushed as like I strongly dislike Snapchat. It is poison, and I think it leads into they know their demographic and they try to lead them into a certain direction in life, and it's either gaming or becoming an OnlyFans person, I guess, on either side of it. That's that's what Andrew says, Jeremy Loffredo.
That's what Andrew says, TM.
You usually have to pay for
that. Yeah, no, I think you're entirely right. And I think that, once they, whether they're a gamer or an OnlyFans person, like while they were on that route to a gamer OnlyFans person, they, picked up a few political ideologies that were given to them, and we want them to vote on, based on those.
Yeah,
Not
when
we,
it's top of mind. Climate change, black square, basically. Yeah. We're about out of time here, Jeremy. We have more chats, I'm hearing? Okay.
I'll read it.
Thank you.
It's kind of far from me as well. Jeremy, this reminds me of a story I saw on YouTube. It was being ripped apart and the kids being stolen and handed over to foster care. I believe it was California. Yeah, I want to look at, like, right now, because we're looking in Kansas City, I would love to look at the more, right here in New York. I would love to see what's happening with hospitals and the foster care system here. I'm sure there's a story here, and I'm sure there's something going on in California. It's, I quoted from this woman, her name's Nancy Schaefer. She was mysteriously, murdered in her house along with her husband. They were both shot in the back, and it was, ruled a murder-suicide. But she spent the last few years of her career looking into Child Protective Services, and she found, ripe corruption in every state that she looked into, and she published a report titled "The Corrupt Business of Child Protective Services." So, any state you look into, their CPS and their hospitals, they might be up to something, and it's something that every journalist and every person should look into and try to fix.
And it turns out the hospital worker in that case was named Hillary Clinton.
That's what John Podesta was the male nurse.
That's right. Hillary just pulls off her wig and just like the face mask, like Mission Impossible, running in the hallway. Tom Cruise, Mission Impossible 2 reference for everybody, where he gets a guy to kill his own henchman by having the disguise on the guy while his jaw was broken. Little factoid, IMDb for you.
The insanity happening in schools today is why my son will not be attending public school. It will be homeschool or Waldorf.
What is Waldorf? Is that Harry Potter?
I think so. I will admit that I'm not familiar with Harry Potter.
It's a reference. I've seen 0 Harry Potters. I'm not afraid to say it. Waldorf. It's a private school. Oh, okay. Well, that's very specific to just be like, I will be sending my child to this exact private school in Ontario. So nobody follow me. David Menzies is on the case, you guys. Is that it? Okay, that's it. Jeremy Loffredo on Twitter. Find him on Instagram under his false flag account. I am Andrew Says TV, and Andrew does on Instagram because those are things that I do. rebelnews.com/livestreams is where you get the daily feed where we are posting the live stream primarily, but of course we're on YouTube, Rumble, Getter, and Odyssey. We thank you for watching. Go to saveevelyn.com to chip into Jeremy's research there. Trips to Kansas City, Missouri are not cheap, especially in the middle or on short notice is what I meant to say. And then, of course, go to my show on rebelnewsplus.com. We're revamping it right now. I'm going to announce that tomorrow, but I guess I've announced it now. Let's kick it to Joe Biden. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you.
They're making a lot of profit, and the public is paying as part of the inflation. And but look, my message is simple. To the companies running gas stations and setting those prices at the pump, bring down the prices you're charging at the pump to reflect the cost.